just make sure that get rid of all the noise. You can hear that all right?
Loud and clear. Yeah, very good.
Hey, you ready to rock and roll?
Let's do it. Let's figure out how this goes.
Fantastic. Mr. Colin Bullen, how are you?
Good morning, Terry. Absolutely marvelous. How are you doing, my friend?
Fantastic. So here we are, Bullen and Heron, superstars of YouTube, together at last. It's what the world has been waiting for. Right? And here we are.
In the good old days, we used to have to stomp around the grounds of Johannesburg and wave our hands to be visible. Now we can do it through technology on video.
Yeah. Now we can intrude your phones, your PCs, your emails. It's great.
People may come to regret watching this. We'll see.
They may. I think those that have turned off already, so we're safe. So those were still with us. Right? Thank you.
Yes.
So before we kick off, firstly, actually, congratulations. So you're now our first test runner of our new YouTube background. Yeah. So plant is still outstanding, but we have the YouTube star shelving. It's obligatory. If you want to get big hits, it's not going to happen doesn't happen without the shelving, Colin.
Well, I'm clearly learning from the master.
And
of course, the team go down this route. We'll follow your lead.
Much to come, right? The Padawan will soon become the master. So, Colin, let's start off. Would you like to tell people who you are, what you do?
I'm an actuary who's lost his way. I think that's the best way to describe it. Once upon a time, I was a full-fledged actuary doing normal things that actuaries do, and the wonderful world of health and well-being tempted me in and evolved to be, I think, probably the world's only behavior change actuary. I keep saying that and nobody's challenged me on it yet, so I suspect that may be still the truth.
This could change that now. There's got to be some guy out there now.
Yeah, I'm going really public on it now. Somebody's going to say, "Oh no, actually, I do this as well." So, the simple journey is South Africa came for me at a time which was great. I evolved into the world of health and well-being. I was at NMG for many years, as you'll know, because we were there together. Moved on to Momentum, came back to the UK in 2010, headed up global health and well-being for Aon for a while, and not too long after that, headed over to, ended up working in Chicago with Andrew Sykes, our mutual friend, and have started this journey that we'll probably talk a little bit about today, which is understanding how and why human beings evolve and change their behavior. And it was very much focused on the world of health and well-being. In 2019, Andrew and I went our separate ways, and with Honey van Veek, we set up Virtuosity. And that's where we are now, helping organizations use the science of behavior change to become more effective, both in terms of health and well-being, but also in the broader performance and productivity sense.
Well, thank you very much. And I guess by way of disclosure, I mean, you and I have been on a couple of journeys down on this topic in a number of guises. So I'm massively thrilled if we even get to share just a bit of that today. But it's a topic I've been dying to chat about. I mean, so you saw the outtake from our video, and I had to stamp on my own foot under that table to say, now is not the time, Derry. No. This is good content. Save this. But there's a few things that, as Benguela, we always talk about, health system strengthening and, trying to make the world a better place, at least from a healthcare perspective or a health systems perspective. And you can't do that without having a discussion about the health of a nation, of a population, and what makes it tick. And South Africa has been at the forefront of this discussion, I think probably more so than any other country. Right? We are home to the largest wellness program in the world. Right? But I don't like to do it. I would say wellness program in the world. And I guess people would have picked up a fair degree of cynicism on my part. And so this is a great opportunity to deal with this. I think the timing is great because I thought about well, it's the new year, got to get a new video out. I know what I want it to be on. But now is actually slightly better because I thought it's new year, people make new year resolutions and let's go. But now this might be hit a bit closer to home for most people, because I'm guessing a large portion of us, we all kind of made the health resolution. Let's get back into the gym and, let's try to do something. And either you're still doing it or you're not. And there's probably a 50-50 there somewhere. I mean, it's purely a guess. There's always the anecdotal stuff, when you get those hardened gym goers. So the ones that guys that live in the gym, right, who are, these salty characters, saying, don't worry, this place is full now. Come back in March, it'll be empty. The place is great in March. These people come and they go, but I think there's a fair degree of truth in that. And I guess the whole question is, why does that happen? Why do we get this sudden urge, this kind of motivation to say, yes, I want to better myself, whether it's just the idea of a new year, new start, great. But it very rarely sticks. When I say very rarely sticks, what we see in wellness is it very rarely sticks for the people where we need it to stick, because it's hard. And so that's where my view has always come from on wellness kind of programs. We have two versions of wellness in South Africa, or wellness programs, if we want to call them that. So one is very much aimed at a corporate level, which I still think today, and I'm happy to be corrected because I haven't engaged in one in a while, but it's not been that long. But it's still largely dominated by the wellness day, or access to screening, and probably propped up by an EAP, somebody you can call for something. And the retail market, or outside of the corporate world, is dominated by incentive programs largely, which promise or try to promote healthy behavior by removing barriers, mostly financial barriers, and give you the incentive to carry on, but with financial incentives down the road, whether it's a discount or a reward or access to cool tech. So if you don't want to pay for that watch, just keep doing what we would do, and away you go. And time again, we either hear stories mostly from the vendors saying how successful it is, and yet the evidence of it says the opposite. Where we don't see an overall lowering of lifestyle-driven NCDs, reducing. Right, South Africa is a horror show when it comes to NCDs. We have what we call a quadruple burden of disease now, but number one of which, right, is no longer HIV. Right? In terms of its prevalence, it is now NCDs. So 40% of our burden of disease is down to NCDs, and the rest is shared by three others. So I'm not getting the sense that it's working. And so my cynical self have always boiled those kind of programs down to really one thing. One is that they're typically linked to an insurer of some shape or form, right? And insurers, more than anything, prize data, right? They are underwriters of risk. And the more they know about whatever it is that you do, the better it is for them to be able to price. That is the uber cynical view of it. And I'd stand here and defend that to my death, that what we buy out there, the programs that we buy out there today, are underwriting vehicles more than wellness vehicles. That said, I don't think their intent was bad, but there's no follow through, because I think they realized to get what they actually thought they would get at the beginning is too hard, and possibly too expensive, and it's too hard to sell. And actually, this will do what we need it to do, so we can just stop here. Right? So there's the Derry Heron uber cynical kind of, and I'm ready to be bashed on it version. And I have to leave names out because we do not have the balance sheet to fight those lawyers. but that's my view. And then I realized, I think my view of it is actually a very South African view, right? Because that's my exposure to it. And I think it would be foolish of me to say, well, that's everything. I mean, we are home of the biggest, that's fine. But I don't think that's it. And again, we call these things wellness programs. They may exist elsewhere and be called something completely different. They may just be called loyalty programs for all intents and purposes. They may be marketing things, and wellness is a thing that's bolt onto it. I mean, so maybe the nomenclature is incorrect. I mean, so the question is really then, I think we need to understand actually what a wellness program actually is, and more to that point, what it isn't.
Yeah.
Would you have a view on that?
Yeah. You get a view of a wellness program based on what you're presented, because you're told it's a wellness program, and you are highlighting that, and you're doing your brackets. But you think of the essence of what are you looking for in a wellness program? You're looking for people's health to be improved in a prospective sense. So you're expecting people to have outcomes, health outcomes, which do not lead to them being ill in the future or being ill less in the future. Is that fair? Would you say that as an umbrella, what you'd expect as wellness, that would be it? If that is true, then the change that has to take place is one that leads to risk profiles changing. Either probability of you getting sick has to be less. And for that to be true, you have to be doing something different. If to think about it, if whatever you're doing in a wellness program, people just keep then doing the same things again and again, is that going to get different health outcomes? No, it's not. So unless something happens to create a change, then you haven't got a wellness program. Therein, I think, lies the rub. If you set up a program that delivers incentives of some variety, and you're talking about what's fair in the individual context, that's all well and good if those incentives drive the behavior change that you're looking for. And I think that's where the gap is that you're alluding to, that although these things are incredibly successful at attracting and retaining good risks from an insurance perspective, are they good at changing individuals' behavior to get the outcomes? You talked in your introduction about individuals that we should be targeting. These people who find those healthy behaviors difficult to engage with. Are they attracted by and changed by this program? If not, is it a wellness program? So that for me is where a real wellness program should come from. From a corporate perspective, a wellness day, a screening, will that cause people to change? Does information cause people to change? No, it doesn't. Take smoking. People still smoke, and we understand that it will kill us earlier. We might tell ourselves stories that suggest that it won't happen to us, but it will probably kill you much earlier.
And smoking is a great one. Depending on where you are in the world, the warnings around smoking come in varying degrees. So I think South Africa is probably at the bottom end of where we are. We put a black and white label saying, smoking will harm your health, can cause cancer, will kill you, sort of thing. Anybody who's been to like Thailand, for example, and he goes looks for a box of cigarettes, there's no branding on a box of cigarettes. I think you have to look at the top to find out what brand it is, whatever, and the rest of the box is a picture of a diseased lung, right? Or a picture of throat cancer, not drawings, right? Actual physical photographs to say this is what's going to happen to you, right? So with the big thing, explaining exactly what this is, right? So it's the most shocking version, and in any other country there would be a PG rating on the images because they're upsetting to children, but this is what they are, and it comes in varying degrees. Like I think in the UK they have to be locked behind things so they're not visible and all of that type of jazz. All right, anybody who's been to Thailand will also realize that a lot of people smoke, right? And hey, guess what? I mean, every other attempt, right, in terms of using information to get people not to smoke has failed. without question, as a lot of money has been spent, and I don't think anybody can point to a statistic that says now less people smoke because of that. It just simply isn't true. And anybody who is honest with themselves, particularly smokers who are honest with, will tell them that doesn't matter. That's not going to change. I mean, you are dealing with a chemical reaction here. A picture of or a message is not enough to override that need, right? And that is, I mean, that's an addiction on one side, but we're still dealing with. So what does it take? I mean, if that's what you're fighting against, I guess smoking is extreme. Right?
It's a proper addiction.
Yeah, but I think maybe it's when we all kind of not understand. I mean, there's some non-smokers, but we all kind of get it, right?
Yeah, that for those of us who think about behavior change and habit change is perhaps the ultimate challenge when you're actually dealing with a real addiction. Can you actually move it? There have been step changes. I don't want to go too far down the smoking route because I need to speak more generally, but there have been step changes in the numbers of people smoking in various countries when certain things have been done. And that, for me, speaks to when you're changing the context for when and where you smoke. So the big one was the cessation of smoking in public places. So in countries that have imposed that, the fact that you are surrounded all the time by people who are not smoking changes your desire to smoke if you are in a context. So let's think about somebody who's going through the process of trying to change. If they've been a smoker for a number of years, they've realized actually they've got a problem. So the first step has been, I realize myself that I've got a problem here and I want to address this. That's the first step in starting the journey. There's some motivation, and maybe somebody's died, somebody's got lung cancer or whatever. There's some motivation in the system which has caused that individual to engage, to think about it, and whatever. They perhaps go onto a smoking cessation program, and they're pretty good in terms of achieving the best possible outcomes. But if, as part of that program, there's no suggestion of bringing the people around you with you, then you've got a potential problem. So you give up, you've stopped smoking for weeks, maybe getting into months, and you go to a party and you're surrounded by your mates. And guess what? Your mates are mostly smokers because that's how you started in the first place. Somebody in all innocence says, like a cigarette. Let's go outside and have a chat. And the next thing you know, you have the cigarette, and then your confidence collapses and you're gone. And it's like, I can't do this. It's not me. I got so far. I was really wonderful, but I've had a cigarette and I'm a failure. I can't do this anymore. And they lose the ability to continue. So there are influences that are affecting that individual on that journey. And if they don't anticipate those influences and the way they could potentially push them back to the old behavior, the chances are they're not going to make it. You talk about New Year's resolutions, it's exactly the same problem.
Yeah, and I guess influence is going to be a bit of a theme, spoiler alert, but it's weird because everything about behavior change is always going to be about influence. It's trying to get somebody to do something different, and it's understanding if you had to understand like why wellness programs, I think, fail, particularly let's say like corporate wellness programs. Corporate wellness programs are actually the warning on the cigarette label. They'll prick your finger and you'll get a whole battery of kind of results. I know what my blood sugar is. I know what my blood pressure or cholesterol, all of that type of jazz. So it's there. So the premise is, I've told you, look, this is bad. Here's what's going to happen to you if you don't sort it out. So best of luck, So now you know, and off you go. It's the premise is kind of the same. I don't see it working. I very rarely see anybody who's been shown that they're at risk from that alone has gone and changed their lives and do whatever. It doesn't work. I mean, so the question would be, well, if that's it, and that's kind of our model here, and it's not working, I mean, what do you do?
It's even worse, because potentially through wellness days and the pinpricks or whatever, conditions are identified. So maybe you're running with high blood glucose and potential risk of diabetes. Suddenly that starts defining you, and it's very easy in the curative world of healthcare to then start treating that condition potentially with drugs. And as soon as you're into the pharmaceuticals, you forget about the behavioral element, which this NCD diabetes is type 2 is very much driven by what you do and what you consume, your exercise behavior and so on. But you can stave it off with pharmaceutical treatment. And as soon as you do that, you're outsourcing the solution to the drugs rather than dealing with the problem yourself. And actually, it's just going to come back and bite you at some stage if you continue down that route. So if the wellness days reveal conditions and supplement those discoveries with support for changing the behaviors that led to those risk factors being identified in the first place, then you're starting to move to what looks more like a wellness program than just, oh, we've identified a risk, you need to go and do something about it now. Off you go.
So there's kind of trick number one, right? Because and I think most will argue then. So like I say, I think the corporate model is wellness program plus EAP, right? Because for exactly that. And again, I would say, it's generally telephonic, and every now and then someone will come up. The problem is it's so infrequent, and also very voluntary. You're hoping that somebody engages, but like you say, you're off to a party or a braai, whatever the case is. Either a friend offers you a fag, or there's a whole lot of red meat in the braai. Yeah, I'm not saying no to that. Come on, and away you go. And like you say, then it's, oh God, I can't do it, and everything kind of slips back, and you begin to understand the degree or the depth to which the influences that you are fighting against, or that you need to influence themselves, if you know what I mean. How is that? Is it possible? How is it smartly done? When you begin to kind of look at it that way, it seems impossible, right? Or it seems, or at least very, very difficult.
Yeah, it is difficult, and we talk about behavior change and new habits being hard. It is, if you don't understand how to create the new habits, and there are a variety of tools and mechanisms that you need to put in place in order for behavior to change on the long-term basis. Are you creating a new habit, a new normal way of being, which is better for you? The thing that most people will miss when they're setting that up and they're trying to make the change is understanding, and you said, spoiler it, all the influences that are in your life that drive you back. Do you mind if I flash up a slide which might help an explanation of what needs to be in place?
Rock and roll. Should be able to.
Okay, let me have a look. Try this, see if that appears. Have you got something?
Yeah, I can see it on my end.
Okay. So you've got the 4 Powers Influence toolkits on your screen, have you?
Yes, I do.
Fantastic. For some reason, you've disappeared off my screen, so let's see if I can get you back. Okay, we'll come back to you in a minute. So in order for behavior change to happen and stick, so that you are in there for the long term and creating these healthy habits that we aspire to have, a number of things need to be in place. There needs to be energy in a system which causes a change to happen and a change to stick. So one of the key things is you've got that motivation. We've talked about this a little bit already, and some of what we've talked about is extrinsic, in the sense that it's an influence or motivation that comes from outside, and particularly in relation to, can you believe that? I turned that off.
So unprofessional.
So unprofessional. I put do not disturb on and it still manages to ring. How does that? So there has to be a motivation in the system, because that's the energy, that's the kicker, that's the thing that starts the process. Extrinsic can help. So when you're looking at a wellness program, typical of what you've got in South Africa, that has financial incentives or incentives for rewards, if you like, these can drive people, but generally over a short period of time, what we find in the science is that those kinds of incentive lose their power, their attraction over a period of time. And unless there is a motivation that comes from inside, from you, there's a drive from the individual themselves in order to make this happen, intrinsic motivation, then it's not going to stick, it's not going to stay. So as you go through the journey of change, finding your personal driver, your personal motivation for making things happen, and it's not going to be the information on the carton that says you're going to die. That's not going to work. It's got to be something meaningful, something passionate that you're passionate about, that you'll hang your hat on and work towards. You also, it's a simple thing, but you need to be able to do what you're going to do. That's, in some cases, certainly if you've been sedentary for a while, for instance, exercise might take a little while to build up. You should do it slowly and not go gung-ho and start saying I'm going to run a marathon next week. You know, that's just not going to happen. Set small incremental goals towards the direction that you want to move. Make sure you're making progress, which is challenging, but so there's a little bit of success when you achieve it, but it is something that you can achieve. And there's a whole kind of science behind goal setting and so on, but small incremental goals is quite an important part. What I'm underlining there is the fact that you need confidence in order to make the change. If you don't have the confidence to make the change, we talked earlier about the smoker who has the cigarette and his confidence and ability to change disintegrates. We don't want that confidence to go away. Other things that are on here, overcoming barriers. You will have barriers to where you want to get to. Knowing what those are, knowing how to circumnavigate those, having tools in place, typically so that when you encounter them, you can pull a lever or two that allows you to bring in a new influence, which supports you to stay on the journey. And that's critical. And then the final one on the list of powers on the left-hand side here is resist temptations. And that's my personal favorite, because until I started studying behavioral psychology, I had no idea that this was a thing. But the illustration I use that helps people understand this when I'm doing public presentations and stuff is, if you think of the analogy of a boxing ring, and you are tied to each of the four posts of the boxing ring by a bungee elastic, and you're in the middle of the ring because all the ropes are of an equal length. When you make a change, it's like moving in that ring. So as you push yourself out, you move, but you create a tension. There's something pulling you back to where you were. That energy has to be anticipated, because if you don't, that's the reality of the life that you live at the moment. And unless you adjust the length of those ropes to adjust the tension, you're always going to be dragged back to where you were, back to the old behavior. So as part of the change process, anticipate those temptations. And one of those is, I go to the party with my mates and I know they smoke, or I know they're drinking, or whatever the case may be, whatever behavior you're trying to change, and have something in place that allows you to deal with that when it comes along. So Derry, I've spoken a lot. You've got to interrupt me. Giving you a little bit.
I don't want to, because I definitely have something triggered and ready to go, because I mean, anybody looks at this and you understand how, first of all, not just the factors that are involved, or the criteria that are involved that you need oversight on, or you need influence on to actually affect behavior change, and indeed habitual behavior change. they're going to see two things. So one is, it should be, well, hang on a second, my current wellness program does only the top suitcase, the top left suitcase. Right. That's about it. Right. And would that be a fair comment? Is that at the moment we're very fixated in terms of when they say grow capability and looking at yourself, right? That's what our programs are designed to influence, right? So they say we're going to remove barriers for you to do healthy things. So whether it is exercise, whether it's nutrition, whether it's meditation, mental health, whatever the case is, we're going to make that stuff easy for you to get, right? Where typically it might have been without our help, it might be a little bit too expensive or slightly out of reach or whatever the case is. And that's great, you know. And what I love and what I'm delighted that people will see is that if they had to think long and hard about it, right? So try to show me anywhere else on this graph where your typical wellness program, corporate or retail or otherwise, falls outside anywhere else other than that top left suitcase. They just don't. And people have asked me, Derry, are you mad? How the biggest programs in the world and there's great success stories and all of that type of jazz. And I'm saying I'm not disputing the business of it, right? Or what would be termed success by yourself versus the actual vendor. But it cannot be successful, right? Particularly in inspiring change in areas where there is risk. Right? So if we're going to make a nation healthier, or indeed any given population, a workforce healthier, right? And this will probably hit closer to home. So an insured population or a workforce or a workplace healthier, right? It's important. You have to grow beyond these making things, you know, less expensive or easier and looking at the individual themselves and understanding the impact of, you know, what happens when that person goes home, right? When they do on the weekend, because it doesn't just stop on the weekend and they go back to Mr. Perfect on the Monday. Right? Those things come into the workplace. Speaking about the workplace, you know, what's that like? And it's, you know, this is such, the spaces issue is such a broad kind of concept. And I think it's often where, you know, and it'll come, I guess, to, I mean, we may as well deal with it now, where companies will start saying, well, what do you mean spaces? Well, you know, is the space that people occupy, right, which is an important part of what influences them, you know, is it a healthy workspace? And some guy may go, no, we run a smelter. Of course it isn't. You know, what do you want us to do? These are difficult things to deal with, but they need to be dealt with. And the reality is your current corporate wellness program sure as hell isn't. So who is? Because without it, it's going to fail. Right? And that's the actual thing. So if you're, as a corporate, if what you're after is productive people, I want them healthy, yes, because maybe we're a nice company, but actually I just want them as productive and as energetic and as creative as humanly can be, that they come to work infused, you know, in a state of high levels of engagement, because that's my competitive edge, right? Regardless of whatever the industry you're in. But then you have to deal with the things that are within your workplace. You can't just rely on, you know, the things that only deal with this person, and simple things like they get slight discounts here and they can, you know, get a watch if they walk 10,000 steps a day, whatever, you know. So I've always loved the 4 powers, having dealt with it, because when people see it for the first time, they're like, oh, damn, we are very, very far off, right? And also realizing that we're not talking about the easy success stories. We're talking about the hard stuff, right? So somebody who is literally very seriously at risk, that needs wholesale change at a sustained level to where they are no longer at risk. That is a massive trip for somebody to take. And quite frankly, just dealing with the top left, I think you said it first, there's great attraction there when it starts. It's sexy and it's new and people go, yeah, let's go. And it becomes very unsexy very quickly, right? Because it becomes familiar and people disengage. And that's always been the thing.
A wellness program is not a benefits program. It's not a choice. It's not a plug and play. And you're starting to touch on what this model then tells companies are actually serious about well-being. There's a couple of reasons why they'd want to be, and you're starting to touch on them, which is those things about engagement, performance, productivity. Hey, there's really strong evidence. There is deep research that we've done to say, actually, you expend the energy and the effort getting this right, you are going to benefit in terms of that. Even if you're a smelter or whatever, it's just about getting an understanding of your context and what you can do and what you can't do. But you can start a journey towards it. What does this look and feel like in practice for organizations who understand it and get on with it well? And there are some fairly major multinationals who've tweaked this theory. They've done the same reading that we've done, and they've started to move in this direction. What does it look like? It feels like a culture of health and well-being. It feels like a place in which behaving healthily is a natural thing to do. And organizations that aspire to move in this direction and want to be successful from a health and well-being perspective need to create that. And they do that, and you started, thank you, taking a view across the four contexts across the top, is by making changes in all four contexts at the same time. Because if you don't, you get this rather curious effect of energy or change in one of the contexts. So you're saying this up, a wellness program, the classic one that we call a wellness program, or the world calls a wellness program, is, as you say, focused entirely on the individual. But the individual is not strong enough on their own in order to make the change and stay the journey. They've got to have support from elsewhere. That comes from the social context, their family, their friends. You talked about going home. That has to be supportive. Their colleagues, the boss, all the way down to the guy who's sweeping the floor, whatever. They need to be thinking along the same lines and pulling in the same direction. If they are, things are going to change. If the physical space is the walls, the machines in which we sit in front of, the offices that we surround ourselves, what's on the factory floor, the paintings on the floor, whatever, the staircases, if they're influencing you to engage in them in a different way and do different things, that's supporting you on the journey. And then the systems piece is the policies, the procedures. It's at the highest level in the country, it's legislation and so on. All those things, if they're pulling in the same direction, guess what? Change is going to happen. It's inevitable. It's impossible for it not to happen. So it's not so much hard to change. It's hard to understand all the influences, or the difficult part is thinking about all those influences and getting them aligned in the direction of travel.
And when I look at this, Colin, I always think, well, where would, you try to think of applicability and where it would go. And I always think, from our biggest potential for change in terms of wellness, I still think sits very much in the workplace in South Africa. And it's certainly the areas where I think workplaces underestimate the influence that they have on their employees, good or bad. And it frustrates me, and has always frustrated me, and I guess that's also where my cynicism comes from, is that we failed, so much in wellness in South Africa in terms of actually positively affecting the workforce as a whole. But when a company looks at what is actually required versus what they have, right? Because most, and I say most, there are some examples, and there's some good examples out there, but most of them have outsourced this role to their insurer through, an existing kind of wellness program that has a nuanced corporate version, a la wellness days, etc. When they begin to realize that, hang on, we're very far away from what we need, and if they're sincere about what they want to do, and we always hope they would be, the discussion is always going to go. We know where this discussion is going to go. It's the hard discussion. The guy's going to sit down and say, "Yeah, but okay, look, I can. There's a lot I can do here. It sounds like a lot of money, right? And we are a business. We need to start accounting for this somehow." And the golden one is, the dragon that they chase. I guess it's always been, where's the ROI? And don't come with me with happier people ROI. I want to see, rands and cents, dollars, pounds ROI, right? We want to see this type of thing. And, there's arguments that people say it doesn't exist or whatever the case is, but there's a lot to unpack there in the sense that how do you remove the overwhelmingness of this? What does a good example of this actually look like in real terms? Versus what we have now.
I'm going to stop the share and edit, Darry. I think they've probably got that. Hopefully, everybody's taken that.
Everybody screenshotted that now. You're in shit now.
Yeah, that's it. Intellectual property's gone.
Yeah.
So, what does it look like in reality? It's your allusion there to it being costly. I disagree. This is just about understanding what the issue is and staying on the path. And none of the influences that we're talking about, I mean, apart from a little bit of structural change in terms of the space that you're in, working on your policies and procedures, none of these things are terribly challenging in terms of what you do. They are what HR departments are doing and should be doing anyway as part of their day-to-day tasks. It's just having a vision. So where organizations have got it right, what has changed? There is a purpose and vision which is attached to this particular area. So usually led by an enlightened CEO or a leader who's got the power to make the change, says we need to make our culture a healthier culture. What do we need to do? Make that happen, team. Go do it. So there's an umbrella that sits over the top, and the CEO that will then talk about it and start building that way of being in the organization. And then hopefully the rest of the directorial executive team will then buy in and start talking about it. HR would love to get this right, but if they don't have that visionary executive support for getting it right, it is just going to be a benefit. It's going to be rattling inside of a tin. It's not going to have the essence of change. So anybody who's impassioned by this needs to get the buy-in from the top level and to create that conversation internally, the internal communication. Once that is started, then there are a number of changes that typically take place, and they sit in I'm pointing at it like it's still on the screen, it's not there anymore. They start thinking about things in the full context. To begin with, inertia will take hold and efforts will be made, and it won't be obvious what impact is actually being had in practice. But the momentum gathers and it builds up and so on. And there are ways to implement which have some quick wins, which show up nicely and so on. But the point will always be that for it to continue and for it not to collapse, and I'll come on to don't let me get off the ROI conversation because I'm an actuary, I've got to talk about numbers, but for the change to maintain its momentum, you have to keep thinking about the full contexts and recycling the influences that happen in each of them so that it retains fresh. Some influences have greater longevity than others. Motivation requires constant refreshment in order to maintain and engage and bring people along. The great thing about it is that it's like any movement. Once it gathers momentum, it's actually hard to stop. So once you've got a core group, and one of the catalysts for change that you'll be familiar with that we use as a methodology to get people to move forward is the concept of change agents. One of the reasons people don't change is they see something that they can't relate to. Cigarette packets may be one. Extremely healthy people, exercising, buff, really great physical shape individuals. You're sedentary, you're overweight. You don't associate with that person at all. So when somebody talks about exercise, you see something that's alien to you completely. Yeah. The idea that exercise can be walking a dog is difficult in South Africa, I know, but I mean, it is more difficult than it is here anyway.
Yes.
But something simple like that, taking a walk, doing something that is easy for you, a small step forward, actually has an amazing impact on your health risks and prospective future. So when you're making that change, embedding in the change process in your organization, community, or whatever it is you're dealing with, individuals who are already on that journey, but they're real people, they're people you can associate with, and you can see where they've come from in order to get it. And so the examples that you hold up, the change agents that exist, the most powerful ones are the ones that say, oh, you look like me. And if you've done it, I can do it too. We are social animals who have evolved through copying what other people do. So if you embed those people into the organization and say, make yourself visible, wave your hands a little, show people what you've done, talk about it, very powerful social influence for getting people to engage in the program. And say, once that starts happening, then more people get on the program and understand what it's all about. They start talking about it. And next thing you know, it's cultural. It's the way we do things around here. So it's pushing it to that tipping point, and then the rest will just happen automatically. So I don't know if that's specific enough.
So before, and like you say, we put a pin on ROI. I think that, so more than anything, right, and particularly for people who might watch this, and some of them may have access to large workplaces, or they advise large workplaces, whatever the case is. I always like to think that there's an intent to do well and give the best advice possible and to help corporates kind of uplift. And the idea of making workforces healthier isn't new, but you've got to be, if you're honest, got to be realistic or honest with themselves to say, we've hit a wall here in South Africa, right? So how do we overcome that? To overcome that wall, it is not insurmountable. It is not, it's not billion-dollar programs or anything like that. It's exactly it's a small thing, small, things like change agents or whatever the case is. These are small little things that you kind of hope kind of gather some sort of almost a viral effect within a company that is absolutely attainable. And weirdly enough, from our experience that we know, it's that something that people want to engage in. You're not actually having to force this in. People will volunteer. Right. And as long as there is kind of constant reinforcement, this thing becomes a self-living animal. It's not a hard thing to do. It's not everything. There's other barriers to cross, etc. But it's a start. And I think if you start having that conversation with your clients or whoever it might be, it is a valuable discussion to have. You are adding the value. It's something that needs to happen. Otherwise, we're going to get stuck in our top right hand corner. And I guess it makes, when you realize that actually this is a lot more attainable than we thought it was, it does make the ROI discussion then, I guess, a little bit easier. But yeah, I mean, again, that question would still raise its head.
Yeah, setting the vision, and whether you're a broker talking to a client, or you're an HR person sitting in the organization at the moment and wanting to make that change, once you have a vision attached to it, and that vision has meaning and purpose attached, the sense of traveling in that direction kind of becomes self-evident, and the conversation evolves. The fact that you will encounter barriers, you will encounter those temptations to revert back to the way things were happening, is perfectly normal. The key thing is not to be derailed by those, to try and anticipate them as far as possible, and to keep the journey intact. And that just means keep the umbrella, keep the purpose and the vision clear, and move behind things. And when you've got the vision, those small incremental steps you're talking about have changed. On their own, they don't do much except start the change process. But you do another one, and you do another one, you do another one, you do another one. And whether you're an individual trying to make change, or an organization trying to make change, the science is exactly the same. They are if you follow that change process stepwise, repeatedly, you'll get where you want to be in the end. It's just I think in this day and age of instant gratification, it's very tempting to believe that we can suddenly just click our fingers and we just say something differently, and we read something differently, and we're going to behave differently. Yeah,
No.
people who understand how and why people do things differently understand that, no, it takes a little bit more influence than that in order to make things happen. And by the way, this is not about getting everybody to move. This is population level work. It's not going to work for everybody, but if it works for the majority, the impact in terms of health outcomes, costs, medical scheme costs, disability costs, so on, your whole benefit costs starts coming down. I'm getting to ROI, you can tell, can't you? The performance, the productivity side of things, it does improve, the engagement improves, and so on. So in terms of the proof that this works, there are two things that get in the way of ROI. I'm going to start now. Have you got something else you want to say?
No. I have something as a follow on, but no, I don't want to stop you. So go ahead.
A couple of things about ROI. Firstly, it's been done hideously poorly across the globe. Everywhere I look, the studies of ROI are appalling. Why? They're measuring things that change over short periods of time. And the one thing we'll know about change programs is most change programs look like big change, come back, 6 months, yay, celebrate, come back in 12, 18 months. Oh, why are we doing what we were doing before? I'm sure we went through a change process. No, because you didn't anticipate the temptations, and therefore things have gone back to where they were. Secondly, they measure things as if they are only based upon the well-being program. So let's just say you just try and that's the change program you're looking at. We implemented a well-being program at this point in time, and look what happened to our absenteeism. Look what happened to our health costs. And it's like, that was all down to the wellness program. No, it wasn't. There were all kinds of other things in play at that point in time, and isolating all the extraneous factors is something most ROI practitioners really, really struggle to do. So ROI, generally speaking, most of what you read about ROI is rubbish, and you're right to doubt it. Everybody who has a doubter's hat on at this point. However, having done the research to understand the relationship between behavior change and outcomes, I'm very convinced that there is ROI in this process. And gut feeling probably takes you to that conclusion, but the numbers have always been highly suspect, and that's why. So if you actually understand the relationship between the starting point, which is the behavior change, we do something differently on an ongoing basis, and then that creates a change in the risk factors, your biometric risks. That creates a change in health conditions and outcomes. And that also, by the way, improves performance and productivity. And all of those have good research backing them, published research, university approved research to explain the relationship between those steps in the journey. Then building an evaluation of ROI is possible. It's prospective, it's actuarial, it's coming in the future. It's not something you're going to get in a 6 to 12 months analysis of changing benefits, but it is reliable, it is predictable, and it will come through in practice. So that's my bang in the drum on the ROI side. That is a difficult thing to do. It requires a lot of research to understand how and why health and wellbeing programs do generate a return. And I'm very happy that the research proves that it is there. And I've done it for a number of organizations to actually evaluate what has happened and will happen, isolating the behavior change piece.
I think what's easier as a start when it comes to a discussion around ROI is that whatever you're doing now, sure as hell isn't giving you any. So if you use that as a starting point to say, guys have got quick to go to ROI all the time, and I've had the discussion all the time, and it's like, why really are you getting, some sort of measurable return now? based on, you know, whatever you do. Because if you are, please, by all means, share it. And yes, we've yet to see one. And yeah, I think so. That's kind of step number one, is when there's a realization is that actually we're not getting anything now, right? We're probably worse off, you know, carrying on the way that we're carrying on. I think the first realization, like any process like this, is realizing what, you know, there's some work to do, or it's not working, and we would need to move on. The idea around the longevity of things is important, and I think if people are skeptical, I've always said this, is that, you know, people tend to be less skeptical about preventative dental benefits for children. You know, no one ever questions that. They think that's great, but you ask them, why is it great? And it's kind of, you know, because kids need clean teeth and all of that. But you say, well, what's preventative about it? No, well, it stops. And not realizing that the preventive, or the value in the prevention there, is not when they are teenagers or early adult. It is much later in life, because left untreated, then you are now looking at, you know, serious health conditions in their 30s and 40s when they're 12. Now, that's very deep and scientific, and not everybody kind of knows that. And there's lots of, almost everything we do in preventive medicine is not for the tomorrow. It is for when you become expensive to us, right? When, you know, when you're in your 70s and 80s, whatever, we hopefully, you know, we can push that hip replacement off as far as humanly possible, if not at all. But we need to do the work now. That's when the ROI comes. And if anybody is cynical about the financial value of that, insurers are the world's worst, right? When it comes to rands and cents. They are just about, right, what do I need to do now so I do not pay for it here? That is our ROI. What am I getting over here? You know, they are the best example in the world of where the return is. The other thing, though, I think is that possibly, I think the word wellness is a misnomer, and maybe is a barrier in its own right. And I spoke to somebody who's a friend of both of ours, who just said, actually, the discussion around wellness needs to stop, right? Particularly in the workplace. If we want to get anything done, what we should be talking about is productivity. If you speak to productivity, well, weirdly enough, you kind of get the attention of people that you didn't have when you were talking about wellness. And it's a great way to think about it, is, yeah, actually, this is what we're after. So if you're talking about ROI, what are the things that affect ROI? And in any kind of thing, you're looking at the people that work for you and how productive they are, and whatever it is, whether it's creative or industrial, doesn't matter, right? Why are you getting the best out of them? That's kind of the way you need to think about it. So forget about health or anything like that. But if you can talk about now the result, which is their productivity, all of a sudden it becomes a lot easier to make sense of. That's my view anyway.
Well, very simply, from my personal journey, I can make a business out of talking about health and well-being, so I've had to start talking about performance.
Yeah. So
it's interesting. You take this behavior change model and you can apply it anywhere, of course. So
yes,
performance and productivity is absolutely it. And by the way, healthy people are more productive. It sounds, you know, I say that and it's so obvious, and yet it seems a very hard thing for organizations to build that statement into their culture in order to create that healthy situation.
Why do you think then? I mean, given, I guess there isn't obvious evidence to what the ideal is, but there certainly should be evidence around. I mean, companies must know now that, you know, we've engaged in these programs and we just don't see, or we struggle to tie up any link of productivity to whatever it is we're doing at the moment, health or productivity wise, actually doesn't matter. But why do you think we keep investing in that stuff?
Because decisions are being made by HR and it benefits context, and therefore it's outsourced to the insurer. What's interest to the insurer? The interest for the insurer is retention and attraction of appropriate risks. The change piece is too hard, as is being proved by even the significant amount of investment, because they're either unable or unwilling to invest in the context change piece in order to support their customers to get that contextual change. So, yeah, I think there's, got no idea where I'm going with Terry now.
It sounded good. You started off well, Colin.
It sounded right, didn't it? I got completely lost at the end of that one.
But I mean, I guess it is. I mean, it's very much. There seems to be to outsource things is always easy, and I guess when the outsourcer comes and tells me with a very high level of evidence that that this has worked, and you're like, thank you very much, I will take that to the person that matters. It's worked. Okay, great. That's taken care of, because it's very rarely a top priority, especially not in our economy and state here. So thinking about the flip side, how should somebody know it's working? I mean, what are the things that they'd look for to say, yeah, look at that. Now, this is definitely working, and it's actually good evidence that it's working.
What you would see when you walked through the door, we're talking about a corporate context here, yeah?
Yeah. Because I think the individual context would be self-evident, right? You'll know, I'm a new person now. I'm no longer at risk, and, you are eagerly engaging. So I think
you'll feel
exactly.
that. So the feeling thing is a curious thing. We dismiss the power of our feelings as humans a little more than we should. When you walk into an organization, you get a feeling for that organization. How does it behave? What is it doing? So when you're when you have been successful, probably you'll walk into the organization and it will feel like an organization that is healthy in its behaviors and its attitudes. There are very many manifestations of this, and there are some great writers in the States and bloggers in the States at the moment who have latched on to understanding what it is that creates a healthy culture. But I want to pull in your point about the productivity side of things. They've understood it in the context of the workplace and the work systems as a whole. It's just one embedded piece in the way in which things are done around here. So the question is, if you are a new employee in that organization, your sense will be, I behave in a healthy way. How might that manifest itself? Well, we have rules around not emailing after certain times of the day. We manage health and well-being in a prospective way that creates trust and confidence in the individuals and the way in which they interact within teams and within the organization. There's freedom to speak and have an opinion. There's no fear in the organization. These are broader concepts than the health and well-being conversation that we're having, but you can bet your bottom dollar bottom rand that there is a health piece to that whole conversation, because it would be incongruent to have an unhealthy lifestyle if you didn't have all those things. And by those things are just mental health and all the other challenges that we are facing up to increasingly in the way in which workplaces are and the way in which they're run. So the answer is not in the ROI. The answer is not that there's a scientific proof out there or whatever. That's not the thing that's going to tip most people over. It's, what does it feel like to be part of this organization? What does it feel like to deal with this organization? If you are a customer of that organization, you also get that sense of, these people seem confident. I can trust what they say. There's an integrity in the way in which they behave. This is language. This is not a language of health and well-being, but it is very much associated with that success that you're trying to allude to, which just speaks to it's a broader conversation. If you think breadth, and when you are trying to set these programs up, then you're in the right frame of mind, which means it's not challenging, but you will see the CEO refer to health as part of the success factors for the organization.
The company.
We have trended in a certain way. We have lower biometric risks showing up in our screenings than have happened in the past. It matters to me, and therefore it matters to the organization. So Unsuccessful ones are where HR are jumping and screaming and waving their hands and plugging in programs that they can buy from the insurers. Successful ones are ones where the organization is on a journey and they know where they're going.
And I mean, you must have come across some in terms of, you know, an example of successful program. We certainly have enough of unsuccessful ones. I mean, if you had to try and distill the and I guess you'd both be very rich men if we could do it, but if you distill the essence of what was it about the organization that bought into it versus those that maybe don't or find the idea difficult?
Invariably, there is a passionate leader who understands the consequences. So convincing somebody, for whatever reason, that's in a senior leadership position that this is the right thing to do is going to be part of getting that done. That's not to say it can't come out of HR. They just got to understand that the conversation needs to happen elsewhere. This part about it being a journey rather than an event, I think there's the attempt to try and create the answer quickly and prove that you've been successful is distasteful in the genuine wellness, performance, productivity context. You can't do it quickly. Don't try to do it quickly. Be patient, which is why, as I say, I don't think any of what we talked about in terms of the solution, the 4 powers type solutions, contextual influence type solutions, should be done with any great investment at all. The only investment, is getting an understanding of what is it we should change? Where are our problems at the moment? Where are those barriers? What temptations will people experience? What social influences do we have in the workplace? How can we bring the individuals along in this journey? What stories should we tell? Those, whether they knew it or not, the successful organizations have thought about those or have addressed those contexts as they have made the change. And I've just touched on one thing there, which I just want to reiterate because it is important and it's not always obvious, is that those organizations are telling stories about themselves. They're telling the story of the journey that they've been on and why they've been successful. And they're telling it internally to reinforce the culture, and they're also speaking externally to create the value that is justified and deserved from having gone down that route. I.e., the shareholders, if you're quoted, see that, the owners see that, the people who are invested in the organization understand why it's worth investing, limited investment in getting this absolutely right, and why it might feel a little different to the organization we were a part of before, but the new feeling is a good one, and it will create performance and productivity and health and well-being as we're driving forward. I feel like I'm saying the same thing over again.
Yeah, but it's important because the longer you hear it, the more you think about it. I think there's, if anything, there should be like almost like, well, yeah, duh, it's. And I guess that's what we're trying to say is you think of the ideal company and the way it should behave and how you want it to behave and how it goes about expressing itself to the world. And like you say, the stories that it tells. I think of the great companies that people like to associate with and the stories that they tell. Think about, things that are always common across those things and what drives that. And you generally start coming very internal, right? It becomes less about how awesome the stuff we make is. And how awesome we are, right? And we are awesome because of certain things. Now, they may be explicit or inexplicit, but generally, if that was true, there's a degree of thought given to your employees' well-being. It's very much a trickle down, and from there you can get into the detail. I think it's quite evident. I've got to ask one thing before we finish, and you've been very kind with your time, Mr. Bullen, and it's a great chat. But we started this conversation, or it came up from that cutaway snippet, and that was a follow on from Catherine's prediction for the end of this year about our focus on mental health, which is, I mean, anybody we're all here, we all went through COVID, and nobody can be deaf or blind to the fact that mental health issues are now at the fore of pretty much everything, right? Probably more so than our physical health. And it's just become, if we've seen people go through difficulty, or we're dealing with people, whether it was from lockdown or, just in general, because maybe now it's easier to talk about, or it's more accepted. But in terms of, a wellness program, whether it's individual or corporate or otherwise, like I say, I always felt that, with the best intent, we've given access to maybe some counseling, whatever the case is, but maybe not kind of the best in dealing with or knowing how to incorporate the idea of mental wellness into this program. I mean, have you any experience there, or is there like a model that should be espoused?
And South Africa's not alone in this. The US to some extent, the journey in relation to mental health is big. The drum is rightly being beaten loudly, and so it should have been many years ago. The important thing about the wellness program is there's a tendency to just think of it in a physiological sense, and we must bring in the psychological as well. But I come back to what I was saying about what is it going to be a successful program, and what does it look like? The two scenarios: you go into a workplace that is controlling, impersonal, robotic in its nature, and you just go and do a job. You almost become a different person when you walk in through the door, because you have to survive. Or you go into an organization where it's just like being at home. You feel comfortable, you feel like you're surrounded by friends, people you talk to, you can trust. Where are you going to perform better? Where are you going to have better mental health? Organizations that are serious about addressing mental health need to think about the environment that they have created for their employees. How do new employees joining, how do they find they have to change and adjust and meld to be part of company XYZ? What is it that makes you special, unique, that you require of people that are being here? And is that healthy? Is that good for their mental health? Is it stressful? Does it create anxiety? Is your career planning, is your job specifications, are all those things supporting me as a new employee to have a happy, healthy, mental healthy relationship with you and with myself and with my colleagues, or is it creating stress? Again, it's one of those things that requires thought and time and general a direction of travel. We've come as a human race through the Industrial Revolution into the Ford-esque style of manufacturing and so on, and it's hard to shake that mechanical, robotic production line type thinking out of organizations. You can name many tech organizations, certainly the multinational tech organizations, who've figured this out. They create spaces for their employees that feel very comfortable. They try as best they can to maintain that level of trust and companionship between teams. Why? Not because it's nice, because it generates innovation. It drives organizations forward. It's very effective at creating.
And you want to talk about ROI? They are the most valuable companies in the world.
You know who we're kind of talking about.
There it is. Yeah.
So the mental health piece comes a lot with what goes on in the broadest context in the workplace. And Mr. Employer, you're in control of that. You can change that, and you can make it a less stressful, less anxious place for people to be. And that will have rewards in twofold. One, they won't be calling the AAP and they won't be off sick. On the positive side, more innovative, high performance that comes from within. So it's all part and parcel of the same thing. And the wellness program, as we would like to have defined it at the beginning, rather than the one that we have at the moment, can be the foundation platform to create that culture that's that you're actually you're aspiring for. That is
indeed. And you know, it's been an hour, and you and I could go on. You know, there's a 2 hours worth of content. There's probably a whole Netflix series worth of this stuff that we can do. I don't know how long we would last, but I
would
think
we get series 2, Derry? Would we get series?
Indeed. It's a conversation I think we will definitely continue. But I think for today, Colin, thank you very, very much for your time. So for any of you that want to speak to Colin and want to get hold of Colin, get hold of his company. I'll put everything in the description if you're okay with that, Mr. Bullen. I know you're always good up for a good chat.
Happy to talk to anybody about anything in this space. It's a tough space, and there's a lot of learning to be done. So I'm very open to meeting new people and talking about it.
Yes, please do. I think we'll all be the better off for it. Colin, thank you very, very much. Thank you all for watching. If you stuck it out this long, this will probably be a series of a couple. I think we can milk this a little bit, Colin. But a fascinating chat. I've enjoyed the hell out of it. Thank you very, very much. And yeah, we'll see you all in the next one. Take care. And there we go. Wow.